Everyone, welcome back to the Jasmine Ortiz show. This is episode 3. I'm so excited to be back here again with our wonderful co-host, Jordi Polycarpe.
Hey.
Our topic this week, hey Jordi, is mental health. Mental health is something that has definitely personally impacted my life. We're going to talk a lot about my own personal experiences with it and Jordi's, but I'm sure that it's something that has impacted all of you as well. Getting right into it, let's begin with some current events. This week, we want to kind of refocus a little bit more on something that we brought up last episode, the JoJo Siwa rebrand. This is just, this is a currently developing story. We have just been blessed with this music video. As of this week, and it's something I want to talk about a little bit more because without having seen the video, we couldn't give a fully fledged out perspective. Now, having seen the video, we have some thoughts as, two people who are also independent artists and have some experience with music video making, also just comparing back to some other child star rebrands that we grew up with. First point that I want to make is that it feels like JoJo was trying to do this grown-up vibe, but almost like what a kid would think is grown-up.
That's a really good way to say that.
Yeah, instead of it feeling like, oh, she's an adult now, this is her, this is authentic, it kind of just feels like pushing those shock value buttons in the sense of the visuals are very sensual, very homoerotic, which honestly great. I actually love that part of the video, the choreography, like it's awesome at parts, but there's also the point of she didn't really go dark enough. And I know you had some thoughts on that too. It just feels like it's still her old brand, but in black and red.
Yeah, it's like a little awkward. I feel like I want to preface this by saying I like it, and it's already stuck in my head, unfortunately.
Yes, literally.
So like I really commend her for trying to put herself out there and be creative. But it kind of reminds me of, have you seen those TikToks of parents like letting their children curse like in a separate room? Like they'll set up their camera and be like, you can say whatever you want, mommy's gonna leave the room, say whatever you want, whatever curse words you know. And then it'll be like 5-year-olds just like repeatedly saying the only word that they know. Yeah, that's kind of what this felt like, especially for the chorus of like saying like one curse word but then like the baby version of other ones.
Yeah, like censoring yourself partially. It is a little awkward. It's like you're already gonna get the explicit label on the song.
Yeah.
Own it. Just full send. Go for it. But it felt like it was dipping a toe in to the water instead of, diving into the deep end. And maybe she just needed that step. I'll give her that. Speaking of water, there was the most awkward green screen of this nighttime abandoned island where not only are they on an island and the outfits make no sense for them being on this island, they're like in full on like padded armor, almost dancer bodysuit,
very
glitter
Kiss-esque.
And rhinestone, Kiss makeup. Like it was the most disjunct visual I've ever seen in a music video, honestly. Like they could have done something sexy, cute, like bikinis or like I don't know, like coconut bra, like something campy and like fun if they wanted to do that. But instead, like, or they could have done a concert venue or a dance space or something grittier like an alleyway or a cityscape for the outfits that they chose. But they chose this weird like tropical background and they didn't even use a real beach.
It almost felt like overproduced, if that makes sense. Like I feel like I get what they were going for, and then also it makes me feel weird that like they've got this like yacht looking thing and like a million dancers. Like and then she like flings herself off the boat.
That was so weird.
Is like drowning and then is resurrected.
Yeah, in the end they literally just play the clips in reverse.
Right.
And she like flings back up onto the edge of the boat, which is also bad green screen because you can see the green screen as she's flying off the boat.
Yeah, I'm confused.
I'm confused too.
I think. Oh.
I would say
I think it's fun.
I think it's fun. I think the song is extremely, extremely catchy.
Mm-hmm.
If what her goal was is to push herself into the forefront of the media again, have her name in everyone's mouths, and have a catchy hit song, you know, check, and check. Like, that's been done.
It's working.
It's working, but I will say it's not my favorite celebrity rebrand. I feel like conceptually they could have dug a little deeper here, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's saying, karma's a B, I should have done better, something, like, I was a bad girl, should have never bleeped around, and it's like, what does this mean?
Right,
What
like
are
the
we talking
lyrical
about here?
content is also okay. So having read through the actual like full lyrics of the song and did a little analysis like yesterday when I saw it, it sounds like she cheated. Again, she didn't even write this song from what I saw. There's 3 writers on it that are not her. So like I'm not gonna assume this is her personal life at all. But
it could
if
just
we're
be
going along
the
with the
song.
storyline, JoJo cheated on somebody. That person broke up with them, and then that person is also now dating somebody new who JoJo thinks is boring.
Yeah.
And is like, well, like karma, like I'm so confused. Like if it's like karma's a B and she's with you right now, it's like, oh, woe is me for cheating.
But
Like
wouldn't
now
it
you're
be,
with somebody I hate.
what I don't understand is, if karma's a B, and I guess she's saying, I was a bad girl, I should have known better, because I guess she's saying the karma's against her,
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, the ex is now with someone else.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is that, like, in the video, JoJo's almost acting like she's karma, or she's going to give someone else karma.
Right.
And like, all of it conceptually doesn't make sense. I'm just going to shout out some of the lyrics that I think are the most ridiculous. I swear I did it all for fun and it meant nothing. It never happened. It was a secret. Like, when a tree falls in the forest, no one hears it.
Period. Period.
She ate with the concept on that, but the delivery was not there.
Yeah.
At all. And then, okay, the next one that I really want to talk about is verse 2. She is a good girl. I think she's boring. Believe me, 20 minutes later, you'll be snoring.
Again, 3 grown people wrote this, by the way.
It feels honestly like a Kids Bop version of like a scathing breakup song.
Yes.
And I just,
maybe
as
that's
an adult,
the point?
like, okay, we are 23, she's maybe like 2021.
Yeah.
This is not relatable to us at all.
No.
At all. Like, I would not be sitting here bumping like, yeah, when the tree falls in the forest, let's
Right.
go.
Although, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, if her fan base has been younger, now I'm wondering if it was like this on purpose. Because if it's like, it's not supposed to connect with her age group, because her fans are not her age group. They're
But the
younger.
weird thing to me is, though, like, let's say your fan base previously was like 7 to 14, which is kind of what it was. Maybe even 5 to 12.
Yeah.
If those kids are, let's say, a couple years older, on the high end, they're maybe like 13 to 16.
Yeah.
That I can see. I can see like 11 to 14-year-olds bumping this.
Yeah. Like,
however,
secretly, if their parents don't let them curse.
Secretly, because it almost feels like still too mature for them, but not mature enough for us.
Exactly.
Which is a really hard like playing ground to be in, because the video is very sensual. Like, I know if I was a parent, I wouldn't want my 10-year-old watching a very, like, you know, sexually charged music video. But nothing explicit actually happens. No kissing. It's just implied.
Right.
And I think she is towing a line here, but, like, she already made the disclaimer, get your kids out of here, you know? And if it's really a younger kid and their parent controls what they're consuming on media, like, they're not hitting that audience. And I think it's a dangerous game to play when you're inviting this audience that is so niche and so specific and, like, so not really marketable into your music, when in reality she should have kind of switched to a general audience perspective if she was aiming to be like a Billboard top 100 artist. That's just my hot take on it. I think
Agreed.
it's interesting, and I want to see, where she goes next with it. But this is also not from a hateful perspective at all. I love JoJo Siwa. I think she is a gay icon. She is one of, honestly, the coolest, funniest people on the internet. I really loved her old content too, just like from a fun, colorful perspective. But I think her team needs to do better. Her
Yeah,
team is like kind of not hitting where it needs to hit right now.
agreed. I think she's definitely been an icon, and like I remember, I think, what was it, Major League Baseball had like posted this one TikTok of her like last year that I feel like us in our 20s like remembered who she is and that she's an adult, and we were like, oh, JoJo Siwa, and kind of she came back into that. But
Yeah.
I feel like if she was gonna do a rebrand, I think there have been better examples, especially from like the Disney stars that we grew up with. Miley Cyrus, obviously, and Selena Gomez, I feel like were really good
Mm-hmm.
examples of that when they started breaking away from Disney Channel and things like that.
Yeah.
Granted, their teams are probably different, and like they might
Yeah.
have had more major label support than JoJo Siwa does. I don't know exactly, but I think this one could have been handled with a little bit more
Like
care.
tact.
Yeah, more tact. Like I
Yeah.
wanted something a little bit less messy.
Yes, like more polished, because it feels like they threw all these random shocking elements and then just mashed them together and they're like, okay, we have a
Yeah.
video.
It
We're
feels like
done.
AI did this. It feels like they went to ChatGPT and they were like, okay, how do you rebrand a child star? What are some super cool, eye catching elements? And ChatGPT was like, oh, an island and also glitter.
Yeah. And I want to talk more about like the Miley and Selena elements, because
hmm
I mean, to be fair, our perspective is a little skewed because we were 12 when Miley had her rebrand. So maybe we were also in like that age group that JoJo's targeting now, like 12 to 14.
hmm
Because we were at the age where we're like, oh yeah, I'm ready to be a teenager. Let me be an adult. Let me out of here. And Miley was there to be like, yeah, I'm going to be a baddie. Like, I'm going to be sexy, but not like overdoing it. And I'm going to have this like Hunger Games kind of dystopian aesthetic in her Can't Be Tamed video. Like,
hmm
I just rewatched it, and even as an adult, I think it still hits home. But I could definitely see like how this was targeting her almost teenage, like into adult audience at the time, like JoJo might be doing. And it had something that was so prominent at the time, which is the Hunger Games and like the dark colors, the almost capital-esque audience watching her as like a zoo animal in a cage. That was all so cutting edge and like rebellious, juxtaposing her Hannah Montana image, that I think JoJo should have done the same thing and gone way darker.
Yeah.
That's just, I think that would have worked better for
I
her.
think darker is a good way to describe it because she's been so sparkly and bright from before that. And same thing with like Selena Gomez. I feel like as she was like sort of making her way out of Wizards of Waverly Place, she had Selena Gomez and The Scene, which was on its own kind of like more colorful but a little bit more mature. And then after that, totally being a solo artist, I think Hands to Myself, that song and music video was a really good example of her kind of like first dip into full rebrand post Disney Channel. And like it was a little bit darker. She's playing like a stalker, but she's still cute. And they had her in this like in her like underwear set, but it still looked like it could have been like a very normal bikini. Like it's like high waisted and it doesn't actually show that much. And I feel like that was handled with a lot of tact and care and was done really well. Um in this case with JoJo, I feel like I want to see more from her. Like I
Mm-hmm.
do genuinely want to see what else she does after this, but also I want to like hear more of her own voice. Like I want to know what it's like when she's writing her own songs and is like vulnerable. I think that's what we're missing from it, like a little bit of vulnerability.
Yeah. I mean, that's also granted that she has the desire and the capability of writing her own songs, because a lot of artists don't also include that in their artistry. I think
hmm
it is kind of this hidden reality of the music industry that I don't know the exact metric. Maybe 60% of main pop artists, 60 to 80%, depending, do not write their own music. So it would actually make her stand out more if she decided to go down that route as well.
hmm
And there's one more person before we move into a little break that I want to discuss. We've been discussing her literally every week because she's a queen and I love her. Ariana Grande, again, like hello.
hmm
She did it, I think, the best because it was still cutesy and her brand, not, but it wasn't ditzy like Cat Valentine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she made that transition so seamlessly because she basically went from being this character on Victorious that is all she was known for, and then Sam and Cat, to then being this, world renowned pop star. And I think the song that stands out for me is Dangerous Woman
Mm-hmm.
because that was 2016. That was one of the first foray she had into the forefront of the music industry where people really started taking her seriously. She launched a super successful tour from that song and subsequent album. And it wasn't overdoing it, but it took her into womanhood and she soared. I just think it was also the kind of bad girl karma thing, right? Like you're saying, I'm a dangerous woman, I'm like a man eater kind of vibe. But she wasn't over explaining herself. She was letting her vocals do all the work. And her
Yes.
vocals were vocaling. They were killing it. So, like, it made people take her seriously. It made people stand back and be like, wow, that's an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So I
No,
think she takes the cake for it for me.
agreed. That's exactly what it is. Her vocals were really able to, because I remember they're like huge, soaring, long vocals, and I think we hadn't had a lot of that from her before that. But I think she made it very clear that like I'm an adult and I am also really talented, and you will take me seriously. And
Yeah,
it wasn't even a question. Yeah, she takes the cake for sure.
absolutely. All right, I want to move into a quick little break before we go into our next segment. Hey guys, welcome back. In this next segment, we'll be discussing our topic of the week. Our topic this week is mental health, and we're going to be going into a couple personal anecdotes, coping mechanisms, and tips and tricks that we've learned just from navigating our own personal experiences and journeys with mental health. So, one thing that I really wanted to start off with is the concept of a dopamine detox. This is kind of something that's been a buzzword on, ironically, social media because it involves taking a break from social media. Um, but something that can be a really dangerous cycle to get into is doom scrolling, aka sitting there on your phone, scrolling mindlessly for hours just to get that instant rush of dopamine from the gratification of seeing content in short form. It feeds us for like 30 to 60 seconds. It entertains us, but then we don't have to invest more attention span or time into it, which is why it gives us those quick little dopamine hits. However, the concept of a dopamine detox revolves around removing yourself from that sort of environment. And that can be anything from engaging with social media, posting it on your own. It could be kind of removing yourself from screen time overall, like video games or television, and trying to refocus on yourself in the physical world that we're actually living in. So that's something that's been pretty useful for me. I don't know if you've had any experiences with that, Jordi.
Yeah, I think trying to take a break from social media is something that people have been talking about a lot because it just, I've heard so many people talk about how they're so unproductive now because of it. The number of people I know actually who have deleted TikTok and Instagram, or will like keep it in a separate folder, or like put it away somewhere so that they aren't necessarily scrolling on it so much, and have said it's increased their productivity, and especially working from home and being on your phone and
Mm-hmm.
like trying to spend time with your friends and feeling like you have to be connected to the social media world. I think we do have so much instant gratification
Mm-hmm.
from social media and posting to get likes, and like everything is short form content now, and it
Yeah.
makes it a lot harder to connect, really. Like that was the whole point of social media, was to be able to connect with each other, but it's actually making us more disconnected. Now, not to say that I love social media, even still I'm addicted as well, and I have yet to take a break. And I think,
I mean, yeah, we can't though because it's our job.
right,
So like when
that
it's
part.
your job, it gets so muddy. We're going to talk about that in a second, but
Yeah,
continue.
no, I think that's exactly what it is too. When you can't take a break, we need to find ways to make it healthy for us. And I also think that's a huge part of why like independent artists and people like that have social media managers who will like have their passcodes and things like that, so that they're not
Yeah.
actually scrolling as much, and they're busy as well. But having
Yeah.
somebody else who's on it specifically for the purpose of posting your content and like for your business and your brand would definitely help with not actually ending up like doom scrolling and things like that.
Yeah, and I just to tack on to that, I think one of the biggest challenges for myself as an independent artist slash content creator, you know, we talked about that last week, having to wear that hat, is
Mm-hmm.
that when I go into Instagram or TikTok and I'm looking for trends to use the sounds from or to copy the same format or even just to edit and upload my content, 9 times out of 10, I'm stuck scrolling again.
Yep.
Before or after I accomplish whatever goal on that app, I'm still getting sucked into it and wasting more time. So when you're not able to have that break, because quite literally I have to be engaged on my social media every single day, something that I've actually looked into is using a content planner and like social media scheduling programs.
Mhm.
So I started using this website called Later. This is not an ad. I just started using them and I wanted to check out what formats they had, and they allow you to upload ahead of time TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, even Instagram Stories, Instagram feed posts, all of the above, to the point that you can even make the first comment on your Instagram post. Like, you know how you comment hashtags on Instagram posts? They allow you to do that ahead of time too. So I've been trying to really edit and organize my content ahead of time and start uploading so that when I choose to go on the apps and engage in a real, authentic, in person kind of way, I don't have to feel like I'm pressured to constantly upload, constantly post, because it's already happening for me in the background.
That's
So that's something
amazing.
else I've really tried to get into. Last night, my friends and I were at this brewery, like down the street from our apartment, and we had this thing where we noticed we were getting on our phones just out of anxiety or social awkwardness. And these are people I've known for like 6 years. There's no reason for that at all. But we were all checking our phones like every 3 minutes. So then one of our friends, Ethan, got fed up and he was like, okay, everyone put their phones in the middle. The first person to check their phone has to buy everyone dessert.
Fair.
And we ended up not checking our phone for the next hour and a half that we were there. No one got dessert, unfortunately, but it was fine. So we were playing dominoes, we were talking, we were engaging, and like that is so, so important. And as a content creator, it feels like I constantly have to document everything. So I have to conscientiously turn that part of my brain off.
Mm, I get that. I'm glad at least that like I feel like our generation has been good about seeing the ramifications of social media on our minds and trying to take a little bit of accountability in that way. Yeah, I feel like at least being able to tell your friends I'll put them in the middle and not worry about it is a really
Mm-hmm.
great thing. So
Yeah, and that's also why I've been trying to plan content ahead of time, because then I don't feel the pressure to constantly document. And that goes into what we were also talking about with work-life balance and working from home. That when your job literally revolves around you, your music, your image, your life, that can feel like the blurriest line of all, because quite literally, like, you're documenting things that happen to you in real life as a real person, but you're also kind of curating it because maybe you don't want to share every intimate detail of your life. So like, how do you draw that line? I don't know how that balance kind of works for you, but
mhm.
I'm almost always like home in my studio setup, working on music here or working on my podcast, working on social media. So it's like, it's right next to my bed. I don't really have that separation. And that can
Yeah.
be like psychologically really difficult.
Oh, same. My desk currently is directly next to my bed.
Yeah.
And just kind of going between like watching movies in bed, working from here, doing work in bed, recording at my desk. I think a lot of people, especially like since COVID, working from home has gotten so normal, or at least like working hybrid. And I feel like for a lot of people, it's a matter of scheduling your social life as well.
Yeah.
Like I mean, from one thing, especially us being in our 20s, like, and I think we talked about a little bit about this last time, but trying to stay on track and organize our lives now that we don't have built-in structure,
Hmm.
I'm realizing that social life also has to be scheduled in, at least for me.
Yeah,
And
no, me
like my
too.
friends working, like our schedules are a little bit different, and some people work from home and some people don't. So I feel like having a good work life balance, if you work from home, includes making a plan to leave your house for work or for not. I've seen
Yeah.
a lot of people, especially in New York, like living in NYC, you can find a lot of really cool, pretty places to do work.
Yeah.
Especially like the projects I've been working on and my friends who are working on like film projects and things like that and meeting up with them. There are hotels that have lobbies where you can use their Wi-Fi for free, and anyone, it's a totally public space, and they're really pretty, and you're allowed to come in and do work. And then also certain cafes and things like that. So I feel like if you're somebody who works from home and you need to kind of find a space to do those things, do some research in your area and
Yeah.
just like find places that are like good for you to go to that you can be productive in, and also staying in contact with your friends and trying to find times
Yeah.
that at least some of you guys or most of you guys are free and you can make a plan to see each other. So like my friends and I, we made a plan for the first Saturday of every month that we
I
have to
like
hang
that.
out,
That's
or that
cool.
weekend.
It also makes me feel more productive when I have someone else there. That's something that I learned I need as a person with ADHD, like a body double is what they've been calling it. Having someone else physically or digitally present, doing something else completely, not even interacting, but doing things simultaneously and getting work done that way makes me feel so much more productive and locked in and engaged.
Yeah. I feel like that goes into like self-care and things like that as well, because when your like social battery is running out and you can't be with your friends all of the time and you have work schedules like that, being able to work with your friends, it keeps that kind of social interaction, and you can have like FaceTime and comfort with the people that you care about while also still being productive and not feeling like every time you see your friends you have to be going out, or like you have to be
Yeah.
staying in and watching a movie. Like there's ways to overlap
Yeah.
that.
And that's the other thing also, like as far as social battery goes, I think when I'm constantly engaging with people online in this space, especially for work, it can feel a little bit emotionally draining sometimes. So having that emotional energy, social energy still left in me to
Hmm.
invest time into my friendships and relationships can be kind of difficult to manage. So it's important to prioritize that as well and set the appropriate boundaries really with when you're working, when is work time, when is relaxing personal time, and when is like I need to get stuff done lifetime, because there's also that. You have to do laundry, you have to cook, you have to clean, you have to go grocery shopping. And those things, like that shouldn't be your only personal time. That shouldn't be your only like me time, because that's not really relaxing. You have to try to like compartmentalize and find that balance, which can be really difficult but extremely necessary.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's a good way to think about it. 100%. Especially with having long distance friends in your 20s as well, like us.
Yeah. Like
I
us,
feel
long
like,
distance besties.
yeah, like you're in Miami, I'm in New York, and I feel like it's also a thing of making sure that you're making time for your friends who are farther away, but then also us like being able to like do work on the phone, or like with some of our other college friends, like FaceTiming and then just working in silence. And
Yeah, I
this
love
happens a
that.
lot, and I feel like it's been a really good way to like still make time for the people that you love and still scheduling in your work in a way that doesn't cause any like burnout.
Yeah. I what something that you said about getting out of the house and scheduling that time. I love that you said that, because I feel like in New York it's a great example of a landscape where the city is really built for that. I mean, you have really reliable public transit. You have a great array of different local shops, local cafes, businesses that really do want you there as a co-working space. One thing about Miami that I will say, it can be a little trickier to find those public spaces without kind of having to do a buy-in of like, okay, I'm going to buy a drink, I'm going to buy coffee, or I'm going to sit here for a meal. Unless it's like a public library or maybe a park, it feels like there is something missing there with just a co-working space, that we need third spaces. And third spaces are something my roommate and I have been talking a lot about, and you and I have been talking a lot about. Um, we used to have that in school. Like we had home, we had school, we also had like anywhere else on campus. anywhere else in Miami that we could just kind of go together. And on a college campus, there are so many co-working or homework study spaces that are completely free and open and accessible for you to use. And all of a sudden, like, not having that available to you feels like a stark contrast, because now you have to go out of your way to find that.
Having social spaces that aren't just for drinking as well. 'Cause
It's
especially,
almost all drinking,
yeah, like living in the
especially in
city,
like me.
yeah, Miami for sure, New York for sure, like trying to find spaces that aren't necessarily just like having a happy hour, 2-for-1 deals and things like that, because that did for a while. I feel like in Miami and New York when I was there, that ended up being a lot of the social outings.
Yeah, and then it also feels like you can't see your friends without spending an exorbitant amount of money on alcohol or food. And while you want to save up money and do specific fun things with your friends, maybe a museum or some sort of event, it shouldn't feel like that's every single time. And it can be hard to find that. Another mental health practice that's been going around is like the sober curious movement, and finding mocktails that are just as enjoyable as drinking an alcoholic beverage. There's even bars and club concepts that have popped up that are solely focused on the mocktail experience. So I want you to share your thoughts on that too.
Mhm.
For me, when I was still in college, I saw this sober curious thing starting to pop up, and I didn't get it. I was just like, why? What's the point? It's so fun. Like, and I was barely 21. I was like, I want to go check out everything. I want to go to every single bar on planet Earth. Like, I was just so excited to be in that scene and like be able to experience that for the first time, that I couldn't really fathom why you wouldn't want to do that. But now, a couple years post grad, like, it's expensive. That's kind of like one of the number one things. Alcohol and going out is so incredibly expensive, especially in Miami, New York. So that's a huge deterrent. I think the second one is also mental health reasons, because I would find that I just don't feel good a night after going out and having a lot of alcoholic beverages, because you get that hangover anxiety. You get that feeling of dread. You waste your entire next day feeling sick and hungover.
Yeah. I think a really huge part of that nowadays too is that a strong like majority, or at least big section of our generation, has been diagnosed with mental health disorders or mental health illness and like mood disorders and things like that. And with some of the medication that people are on, you can't drink or smoke,
Mm-hmm.
or you shouldn't be drinking or smoking. And I think for a really long time, our generation got so used to like going out, and especially like if you're in your 20s, I feel like every generation that was in their 20s at some point was like heavily drinking, heavily smoking,
Mm-hmm.
and like using it as a way to socialize. But I
Yeah.
think now that we are getting diagnosed and have the resources to get diagnosed with things like that, it is making it a little bit harder for people in our generation, especially women in particular, because we went so like undiagnosed for so long and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
different mental illnesses, that being able to find spaces that are geared towards having a fun time with your friends and being young and in your 20s and not having to have alcohol as part of the equation, I think is a
Mm-hmm.
huge like breakthrough in the mental health community. Because I think we as people deserve to have spaces that aren't just trying to like take our money through alcohol, especially when it's a mental health issue.
Yeah, and I think take our money, period. Like, I
Yeah,
need more of
I'm
those, like,
broke.
I I need more of those, like, 2016 Tumblr, like, bookstores where you can go have a meet cute. Where's that in Miami?
Oh, I don't know. I was gonna say in New York, they're on the Lower East Side.
Yes, okay, well, we have one
Come
recommendation
visit.
for you guys. All right, so I definitely want to get more in depth on this topic a little bit later, but we're going to go into a quick break before our artist interview. Hey guys, welcome back. We're moving into my favorite segment on the show, the Uncut Diamonds segment. So this week we have a very special guest. Her name is Jasmine Ortiz. I'm actually going to be passing it over to Jordi, my lovely co-host, where she's going to interview me.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, you guys, we already know a little bit about Jasmine, and if you clicked on this podcast, you obviously know that she is our titular person of the show, but we all want to know a little bit more about you. So, can you give us your artist elevator pitch.
Yes, absolutely. So I am an independent pop R&B reggaeton fusion artist. I make bilingual music. I live in Miami, Florida, and I've been doing this my whole life. I love singing, songwriting, performing.
Beautiful. Love that. I wanted to ask you, and especially I know a little bit about you, like being your friend and being in Frost, but in terms of your artistry and your life and your family, who do you think in your life inspires you the most?
That is such a good question. It's kind of a hard one because there's so many people, but I think the person that I think has had so much adversity and overcome it and really succeeded in difficult career paths is my mom. She is a female director, writer, producer, and I've seen her go up against a lot of misogyny in the industry. I've seen her succeed and excel beyond that. And right now she's in Los Angeles. I'm actually going to visit her there tomorrow, so I'm excited. Living her dream and really working hard to pursue this passion of hers. So I'm super inspired by her.
It's beautiful. What do you think are some lessons that she's passed on to you?
I think some of the lessons that she's passed down to me have number one been not to give up. No matter how challenging an issue can feel, no matter how much something feels like a setback, she's always taught me that it's really just a setup for your next opportunity. I've seen how hard she works towards the things that she cares about, and that work ethic has really been passed on to me as well.
And I can tell. You're one of the most hardest, like, you're one of the hardest working people I know. So we love
Thank
Maria.
you. Shout out Maria
Shout out
Picone.
Maria. um, so coming from Frost, and I've known you as songwriter, guitarist, producer, performer, multi hyphenate. And what do you feel like your strongest skill set has been?
Okay, I have like two answers for this. I'll give you an emotional, social one and then a technical one.
Mhm.
I think perseverance, this kind of goes into not giving up. That has been my strongest skill set by far. Perseverance and patience, actually, because I've been doing this nonstop professionally since I was 16 and I'm 23. I think there's a lot that goes to be shown for a career that has developed and been shaped through my childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood. I had time, like we mentioned last week, to incubate, really find myself and my sound while I was at Frost as a student. And I think being a student there drastically altered for the better my career trajectory and made me the musician and person that I am today. Um, but I will say, like, that perseverance, if I didn't have that kind of resilience to go up against the incredible amount of obstacles that there are in being an independent artist, I don't think I would still be doing this. And I had a moment the summer after graduation where I felt so burnt out and so dejected and like nothing was really going my way. It was hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel in those first like 6 to 8 months. And we kind of talked about this as well with Marley. Um, Post college in a non traditional career path can feel like you're staring into the void. Post college in any career can feel like you're staring into the void, but especially when there's not like a linear path for you to move forward and find success. So I really had to try to find that drive and passion again within myself. And it took me a while to fall in love with making music again, but I'm happy that I did. I didn't give up. Oh, and sorry, part two
No.
to that. A technical answer to what my strongest skill set is would definitely be songwriting. I feel I'm a very strong vocalist. I love singing and I'm a good performer. I love performing. I've honed a lot of my production skills as well, but my favorite, most cherished skill is being a songwriter. That is where I find my home. That is where I build my world. That is where I feel most comfortable and happiest in that creative space. It can be any genre, really. It could be a sync licensing pitch for a specific prompt for like a TV show or commercial. It can be a writing assignment from our songwriting professor. It can be something that I'm inspired from a beat that I've heard and I want to write over it. It could be a guitar lick. It could be chord progression, and writing alongside any of those musical elements just gives me the most joy and fulfillment I've ever felt in my life.
I think that's amazing. I'm glad that you talked about perseverance and resilience. So I think that's is a huge part of being an artist in the industry, and super glad that you were able to kind of take that into everything that you've done afterwards.
Thank you.
In line with that, what do you think motivates you to keep creating music?
I think it's just this undying passion that I have to share my story, to share even other people's stories, to be able to create a space where people can relate and find themselves in my music. I think that connection is something that really drives me because I want to have the experience one day where I'm singing to a sold out crowd and people are singing back to me. I and not for an ego boost, really just because I think that would be so deeply impactful for me to see how my music is impacting and touching other people. So I think those moments are really what I'm looking forward to and what I seek out. And the undying dream that I've had my entire life, I just don't want to give up on myself. I think I'm worth it. I'm worth putting in the effort. I'm worth continuing on in this journey. And I've gone so far. I'm closer to my goal than I am to the starting point.
Yeah. I was gonna ask, can you talk more about your starting point? Like what really got
Yeah,
you into this and to stick with it?
absolutely. So I started out playing piano when I was only 3, but there's a backstory to that also. It wasn't just like, okay, like throw your kid in piano lessons. It wasn't like that. I was 2 in Atlantic City and my parents were at a dinner meeting. And during this dinner meeting, I climbed down from my high chair as I was extremely prone to do. I actually remember climbing in and out of my crib as a kid, like not a little baby, but 2 years old. I do genuinely have those memories of climbing out and thinking I was a ninja. So I did that in this restaurant. It was an old Prohibition era 1920s theater that was converted into a restaurant. And this is all a story my mom told me because I don't actually remember this part, but she has people to corroborate. I crawl over or walk over to the stage, walk up the steps, and sit down at this grand piano on the stage. Literally 2 years old, like 2.5 maybe. And I start like tapping out this little melody. And apparently it wasn't like boom, like some crazy little, and looks over in horror, like, oh my God, my kid's on the stage. And then everyone like gives a little like, ooh, like clap for the baby on stage. My mom rushes up there to get me off. I start arguing with her at 2. I'm like, will you get me a piano? Will you get me piano lessons? I'm literally there negotiating with her, basically refusing to leave the stage until she says yes. So she placates me, says yes. Couple more months go by. I'm asking her, where are the piano lessons? Where are the piano lessons? Where are the piano lessons? And she's like, no one will take you. You're 2.5, 3 years old. Like, they don't want a toddler. So she searched and searched for a teacher just to get me an audition, just to placate me more, because I was being really persistent. And then we ended up meeting my piano teacher, Elizabeth Keller, who I was with for 15 years. And I was like 3 years old sitting at her piano. My mom's like, okay, please just like do this. I'll come back in 2 years when she's 5. Like, then we'll start. Just, tell her she's too young. So she gives me the audition, and that's not what happened. I end up actually like following along with the lesson she was teaching me. I learned where middle C was. I started learning about like do, re, mi, just right then and there. Just very basic preliminary piano, but I was paying attention and following along. Then my mom comes back 30 minutes later and she's like, so, like, what happened? And my teacher was like, well, I'll take her. I'm going to break my own rule. First time in 30 years, I'm going to take someone under 5. And my mom, being the New Yorker that she is, was like, this lady's trying to pull a fast one on me. She's just trying to take my lesson money. So then she sits down. She's like, okay, well, show me what she learned. And I was able to replicate like an octave, middle C, like the little basic preliminary things. And my mom's like, she says now, like, obviously she's grateful that I started the lessons, but she said she thought in the moment, like, oh my God, this is the exact opposite of what I wanted to happen. I was trying to put this off for another couple of years. But then I started lessons with her, and I ended up taking voice lessons with her as well. And, 15 years in the making, she helped me become the musician that I am now.
That's beautiful. Yeah, your mom wasn't gonna keep you from music if she tried with her bare hands. which is just really a testament to like you belong here, like, and so clearly already. I feel like anyone who knows you knows that you are doing exactly what you should be. But that's
Thank
absolutely,
you.
that's beautiful. I love that story. I've never heard it before, so that's awesome.
I'm happy I could share it with you.
Good. Can you talk a little bit about some of your musical influences?
Absolutely, yeah. So in the Latin world, which I've definitely been honing in on the past few years, Carol G and Bad Bunny are some of my favorite modern reggaeton música urbana artists. I love their lyricism. I love their challenging of conventions in Latin music, like Bad Bunny challenging toxic masculinity, painting his nails, wearing skirts, being very open about his sexuality. I think all of those things are extremely unique to the genre, and they're opening it up in a way that has never been done before. Carol G, La Bichota, I love her to death. She is just such an icon. And having seen her live at the Mañana Será Bonito Fest concert in Medellin, her hometown, that changed everything for me because I saw her heart and soul on that stage. She genuinely connected to everyone in that audience, and I could tell it meant so much to her. I get chills talking about it. I could tell it meant so much to her performing like that in the stadium in her hometown and really being able to provide that for her community. She even streamed her concert for free in every neighborhood in Medellin, which
That's
just, it gives
beautiful.
me chills. Like, the people who could not pay for a ticket were not barred from seeing the concert.
Yeah.
And I actually heard from someone on her team that she wanted to provide the concert for free, completely free, but because of safety issues she wasn't able to. So, like, it gives me chills. She's so talented. Her vocals are amazing, and she can perform in every genre because she had multiple genres in her show, and that's something I really relate to. Because moving on from that, I also am super influenced by rock, grunge, post-hardcore. Like, growing up, I listened to a lot of Nirvana. Red Hot Chili Peppers are by far my favorite band. I always really loved the post-hardcore scene. I was like in that whole vibe in high school. I loved Pierce the Veil, like Bless the Fall, Bring Me the Horizon. Like, I loved that screamo kind of vibe. So that's really what got me into guitar, actually. And I wanted to be like a heavy metal lead guitarist. So that's a huge part of my instrumental influence. And aside from that, of course, like the pop star queens, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Beyonce, Rihanna, like those women completely altered like how deeply I felt I could connect to my artistry. So yeah, those are some of my influences.
Yeah, no, your music taste has always been super multifaceted, which is great. And it really shows through your music and your talent, which is great.
Thank you.
With being able to show your talent and things like that to the world, I'm glad that obviously I've known you for a while, but I'm glad that a little bit more of the world gets to meet you through this podcast and radio show. And huge thank you to the Heat Miami for bringing Jasmine to more of the world. Can you talk a little bit about why you even wanted to do this show and why it's important to you?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that because this has actually been an enormous positive change in my life. I feel like it's given me so much drive and re-energized everything I feel about making this career work for me, about my artistry, about everything. Reason being, I've always felt like I had a lot to share with the world, even beyond my music. And I definitely wanted to be a place or be a community, provide that where people could feel comfortable sharing things that aren't normally talked about in mainstream media. Like our episode today about mental health, our first episode about body image, our second episode about the reality of being an independent artist and the realities of higher education, pros and cons. I don't want other young women like us to have felt so lost like we did immediately after college. I think this podcast is really geared towards that community of young, young people in general. And being able to realize that no matter how much someone on the exterior appears to be succeeding or striving or like reaching all their goals, every single person has taken a distinct path to get there. Every single person has faced struggles to get there. And every single person is still facing struggles that might just be internal, that they might be masking from the rest of the world. And I think this podcast gives me an opportunity to share not only for myself what's going on kind of behind the scenes and internally, but also for other artists like you and Marley.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing your perspective with the world, because I think you're such an intelligent and talented person. And I
Thank
think more
you.
people deserve to hear you. So thanks for that. Yeah. Um,
Thank
I
you.
want to talk a little bit about your newest song, No Quiero Na, has been in all of my dreams, and like it's been the soundtrack of my life since it got released. It's your number one on streaming platforms right now. It's at the very top of your Spotify. Can you talk a little bit about the song and what inspired it, and a little bit about the music video?
Absolutely. This is my baby. I absolutely adore this song. I adore the music video. I feel like it was the first time, genuinely, or maybe one of the first times, that I was able to fully fuse my influences of like reggaeton, Carol G, Bad Bunny vibe with Ariana Grande, Rihanna, Lady Gaga. That is my happy place, being able to find that middle ground and also being able to communicate with both sides of my identity. Being a Latina who's bilingual, I'm able to sing in English and Spanish, and being able to like have that ability to communicate to multiple communities has been super special for me. I've been able to connect to my Latinidad like never before, having moved to Miami, but even more so, having done so much work in Colombia, in Medellin. Being able to tour there for 3 months last summer was life changing. I got to really be boots on the ground, involved in the local culture, involved in the community building, involved in the music and art scene there. And I got to know so many wonderful people. I never would have had that experience just being a tourist in Latin America. I had to live there. I had to experience it firsthand. And I even got to visit Paraguay this past summer, also as a part of my tour. I performed for my largest audience ever, 20,000 people, Expo del Norte in Asunción, Paraguay. Um, Actually, it was Concepcion, Paraguay. Asuncion is the capital where we were staying initially. But it was so incredible getting to not only perform for that kind of audience, but also meet the other artists that were at the festival and engage with them and like hear their stories and their experiences, because all of us were at different parts of our career. Some people were starting out a little bit more recently than me. Some people had been in the game 20 plus years. Some people were, world famous musicians that I was getting to perform alongside. So it was really, really cool. And I just love to be able to have that experience across the board. So No Quiero Na to me symbolizes everything that I've gone through as an independent artist, kind of reaching this point and culminating in a song like that.
That's beautiful. It's been really great to see you step into your artistry in that way. You just seem so comfortable and so yourself
Thank
in this
you.
video and on the song. Your voice is amazing. So thank you for sharing your story. And
Thank
like,
you.
I'm sure your listeners love you and love hearing more about who you are and your artistry and what influenced you. So thank you for sharing and being vulnerable.
Absolutely. And I love the questions that you presented. They were really great. I realized I didn't answer part of that. What inspired No Quiero Na and like the story behind the song is basically No Quiero Na, translated, means I don't want anything to do with you. So it's a very direct chorus. No quiero nada de nada, por favor, which is the lyric of the chorus. No quiero nada, I don't want anything. De nada, thank you, por favor, please. So it's like a fun play on words where I'm saying the same syllables, but they mean different things because of how the word is broken up. So I just love the wordplay on that to begin with. I think that was super fun. And then getting to really bring more of the story out in the second verse, where I'm also singing in English. I say, broke up over text. You became my ex when I told you that I'm next, and you showed me disrespect. And that part is just more so inspired by relationships and even friendships that I've had in the past, where in expressing the dream that I am pursuing, in showing the amount of faith I have in myself that this is going to happen. This is not a pipe dream, this is a reality, and it's really just a matter of time and a matter of continuing the work that I'm doing to get to the point that I want. Just the reactions I would have from certain people where I felt like they were also just placating me. They didn't truly believe in me. They didn't even support my vision. They didn't support my music, my videos. And these are people very close to me that I felt a little bit, I was a little disappointed in them because I felt like I was being a supportive friend or supportive partner to them. And in that point, I wasn't really feeling that love back. So that's where the inspiration of the song comes from, and just realizing that you have to know your worth. And if someone is not adding a benefit to your life, and I don't mean a self-serving benefit, I mean like emotionally and in your soul, if they're not there fully with their love to support you, then you do not need that energy in your life, and it's only a detriment.
Amazing. If you guys haven't heard it, please go check it out. No Quiero Na on all streaming platforms. For our next segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about mental health, and we'll bring us into the next one.
Jasmine Ortiz, ya se apagó la llama y no revive mañana. Ese beso que me diste fue como veneno, una daga en el alma. Yo ya no creo nada, ni una sola palabra. Si me buscas para lo mismo, vete que no quiero nada de nada. Contigo no quiero nada de nada, por favor. You don't deserve my time, ya te he sacado de mi corazón. Contigo no quiero nada de nada anymore. My friends told me you were a liar, I just didn't wanna let you go. Broke up over text, you became my ex. When I told you that I'm next and you showed me disrespect, you said that I'm full of shit, this is not a hit. You can't hurt me with your words, cause I'm up again. And I'm up with friends, rolling through the hills in my brand new Benz. Mirando los luces de Los Ángeles, me tendrás que ver, estoy a otro nivel. Porque yo ya no creo nada, ni una sola palabra. Si me buscas para lo mismo, vete que no quiero nada de nada. Contigo no quiero nada de nada, por favor. You don't deserve my time, ya te he sacado de mi corazón. Contigo no quiero nada de nada anymore. My friends told me you were a liar, I just didn't wanna let you go. Basta ya, mentiroso, escandaloso. Tú no me digas más nada, solo hecho pa' allá, mentiroso, escandaloso. Tú no me digas más nada, solo hecho pa' allá, mentiroso, escandaloso. Tú no me digas más nada, solo hecho pa' allá, mentiroso, escandaloso. Tú no me digas más nada. Yo ya no creo nada, ni una sola palabra. Si me buscas para lo mismo, vete que no quiero nada de nada. Contigo no quiero nada de nada, por favor. You don't deserve my time, ya te he sacado de mi corazón. Contigo no quiero nada de nada anymore. My friends told me you were a liar, I just didn't wanna let you go. Jasmine Ortiz.
All right. Thank you so much, Jordi, for the excellent interview. I really enjoy just, talking to you, obviously, in general. But it was cool getting to share a little bit more about myself with you.
Uh-huh.
So, moving on into our next segment, we are going to talk a little bit more in depth about mental health. I know we touched upon some different coping mechanisms, different personal stories in the last time that we discussed it, but I want to go a little bit more personal with this segment. I want to talk about my experience as a woman with ADHD and as someone who was diagnosed like a little bit later in life, in my early 20s, as opposed to in childhood. So just to give a little preface on this topic, males are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD, first of all, and a lot of this has to do with a misconception about how these symptoms are supposed to present themselves in people. ADHD can often be seen as like a little boy's, condition. where someone's running around, they're loud, they're boisterous, they're bouncing their leg, they can't pay attention in class. And that can be the reality for a lot of young men that struggle with ADHD, even young adults. However, as a woman, our symptoms can present extremely differently, to the point that it can almost feel undetectable until you get to an age where you yourself can recognize the symptoms, as opposed to like a teacher or a parent recognizing it for you. So when my experience with that was, throughout college, realizing that I would get into patterns of burnout, and the reason being that my expectations for myself were so astronomically high, they were almost unattainable. And that was because I had a perfectionist kind of mentality, very type A personality, where my anxiety was forcing me down this path of thinking, if it's not perfect, it's not good enough. And I felt that way about my music, about my academics, about my social life, about my physical appearance. So I strove for perfection. And one thing that they hammer into you in music school is practice does not make perfect. Practice makes progress. That is the truth. And I had to very difficultly swallow that pill eventually. I still struggle with perfectionism. I'm very type A, like I said, but because the symptoms of ADHD are typically the opposite, where people might be struggling in school, they might not be able to focus on things. It's so hard to identify that in a woman who got straight A's, who was an honor roll student, who took AP classes, who ended up going to a great university. It's like my parents were like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, what do you mean? Like, you can't focus on things. That's not a problem. And I was like, it is a problem though, and I'm going to address it. So it took me taking accountability and agency as an adult to address it. Some of the symptoms that I dealt with that were really confusing to kind of navigate were, like being a little spaced out and inattentive sometimes in conversations. Like if I'm not completely honed in on what the person's talking about, or I'm not super close to the person, it can feel so hard to like actually hold on to every word a person's saying for some reason. It can kind of feel like, okay, I caught the first half of that, and I'll just use context clues for the rest, because my brain kind of like clicks off if I'm not engaged. That's a part of it that became frustrating for me, because then I also had the habit of interjecting in conversations, which is another ADHD symptom. And that can feel super isolating because people don't like when you interject. It's not like a socially acceptable thing. So then when that's how my brain works, and while someone else is talking, I'm thinking about the next thing I'm going to say because I'm anxious about how it's going to come across in the conversation, then I interject. It just seems like I'm rude. So I had to deal with like unpacking all of those things, while also realizing like I was sometimes like having issues with emotional regulation. I would lash out, especially during PMS. Like hormones greatly exacerbate ADHD symptoms in women. It can disrupt your sleep, it can disrupt your mood, it can disrupt your productivity and your attention span, all because your hormones are imbalanced and it's affecting your condition. I also have always kind of struggled with memory issues, but randomly I would really remember some like stats and statistics and like fun facts, and I would just have this weird catalog of very specific things that I could remember, and then nothing else. Like you could ask me I don't know, you could ask me like what I wore on my first day of preschool and I could tell you, and then like I won't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. And that's how drastic it can be. For example, like sometimes I'll misremember things that happened. Like I'll explain to Jordi a situation that she was totally there for, that I forgot exactly who was there. I just know that like a group of people that I'm friends with were present at a location, and I have no other context clues except for specifically what happened like within my line of sight. And those memory issues are also isolating, because then you're re-explaining yourself, or people think you're rude again because you forgot they were there. And I'm like, it's not personal, I'm sorry. I just don't remember things. That was a thing I really had to think about. And then one more thing is like the high standards can really, really be damaging, because you're striving for this perfectionism that ultimately is not attainable. This is something I'm still like working through with therapy. Like kind of unpacking why I have such high standards for myself and being able to take a step back and realize, okay, maybe like 90% of that is where the standard should actually be instead of 100% of that. And how that can impact your self-esteem, because I know that I feel horrible about myself if I think that I did something that I perceive as a failure. So that, I guess, like failure success ratio and how it plays into your self-esteem can be really difficult to navigate. So yeah, that's a little bit about like the intro to ADHD in women. I don't know if you have any experience with like some other conditions or things that you've had in your life,
Yeah,
Jordi.
I think when it comes to talking about ADHD, and because it's been such a talked about topic with our generation in particular, also because of social media and attention spans and things like that, I think the ways that finally people are being able to get diagnosed, I'm really glad that that's happening. It sucks that it's happening in our 20s because I think like a lot of our friends in particular do have ADHD or suspect that they might have ADHD because they've got all the like textbook symptoms, or the ones that go a little bit more unnoticed in women as well. And I think for me as well, like teaching music lessons to kids and being able to, now that I understand a lot more about mental health and how it presents itself in kids, especially like going through it and seeing my friends struggling with it, I feel like our teachers from when we were younger didn't really know what to look for, or they were looking for the more obvious signs. And especially when it comes to teaching creative kids, I think there's a lot of overlap between different types of like mental illnesses or different types of like mood or behavioral things, that also because they're creative kids, like they have so much passion and energy and talent, and being able to, especially if some of these kids are already diagnosed, being able to kind of like let them create and let them be themselves and like move through their work and themselves how they normally are, without feeling like you have to tell them like to be quiet or sit still or kind of like try to make them smaller, which I think is what a lot of our teachers tried to do in a way of like trying to manage classrooms, and like they didn't have a lot of training for it. But I think nowadays, at least, there are so many people that have these kinds of things, and younger teachers who can kind of work through that without needing to like make kids feel bad about it, which I think they
Yeah.
did from before. And for me in particular, like anxiety and depression is a thing that I've dealt with a lot in my mental health, and I wish that I had teachers who kind of knew how to deal with that. But I remember having a student where like if they tell me they have anxiety and or they don't feel comfortable in a class setting, or like they're trying to figure out how to navigate that, but they're supposed to be singing and performing and trying to figure out what to do, I'm glad at least that I can be like, I have it too. Like, we can work through this. We can create and be like as loud or as passionate or not as much as you want to be, because this is an open and comfortable space. And I think that our generation has done a really good job of, because we went through it and because we went undiagnosed or didn't have the resources, but now do. I think the next generation is going to be so much better off for it, and especially our kids. Like if we end up having kids, I just think that it's been interesting to see how much more it's been talked about and how the conversation around it has changed in a really good way.
Absolutely. And I want to like respond to certain things that you said, because the comorbid conditions is such a real thing with ADHD, like anxiety, depression, being on the autism spectrum. All of those things can easily be comorbid with ADHD. And sometimes the symptoms and treatments overlap. Sometimes the symptoms and treatments are complete opposites. So it's a really nuanced discussion, and I'm happy that the taboo around it, the stigma, has really begun lifting. And it's actually on social media that I discovered I had ADHD, more or less, because a couple things came up on my feed during the pandemic where I saw girls describing like their ADHD symptoms. I was like, scratch head, like that sounds familiar. Wait, check.
The pandemic had us discovering
like,
a lot about ourselves.
Yeah, I'm like, wow. So, okay, I do have this, but I just kind of self-diagnosed for 2 or 3 years. I didn't do anything about it because I was honestly really struggling with making that first step because I grew up in a time where there was a lot of stigma around it. There was a lot of stigma around being medicated or not medicated, and people looking at your parents like, oh, you're a bad parent if you're medicating your kid. You're a bad parent if you're not medicating your kid. And there was just so much of that, and for no reason, because ultimately your kid or you as an adult and your psychiatrist have to make that decision as a team, and it's not one size fits all. Like one medication might work for someone else, that doesn't work for you. And that's just how it is. You can't focus on it being something that fits the mold. Another thing you were saying is like allowing kids to be creative and live in that space and make it comfortable for them. I think ADHD can be a superpower if you allow it to be. That sounds very chuggy. I'm sorry. But honestly, like, slap it on a t-shirt, girl. Like, let's go to Etsy. Where's that? But basically, the hyper focusing that ADHD sometimes allows you to do, very sometimes, really benefits creative careers and creative pursuits, passions. Like, for example, the other day I taught a student and I was recording her on Logic because she's a first-time songwriter, wants to sing just kind of for fun, but I wanted her to really feel what it's like to get the recording artist experience. So I recorded her on Logic, and then after she left, I fully like produced and mixed the song just for fun. And just because I got like hyper focused on it and I loved how her vocals sounded, so I wanted to like play around and do my little like producer magic. And then I sent it to her and she was blown away that she could sound like that. Because we wrote a song that was in the style of The Weeknd, and she really did a great job like taking that prompt and running with it. And then I added the production elements that sounded like The Weeknd, and she was like, oh my God, like this is so exciting. So I love getting to provide that feeling for other people, but I also can provide it for myself because I love hyper focusing on my own music and making things like that. And I feel like I do best, which is not the healthiest thing always, but I kind of do best in like, oh, let's hyper focus for like 6 hours and then like not touch it for 2 weeks, but that can be dangerous as well. So it's a matter of like finding that balance of, okay, maybe instead of 6 or 12 hours of hyper focusing, I'll hyper focus for like 3 or 4 really good hours, and then I'll take a mental break.
That'll do it. I think a really big part of that too is, especially when it comes to like hyperfixating, but then also from what I've heard of people with ADHD and feeling like a sense of perfectionism. I want to ask you about this too, but I feel like there is always a cultural aspect to it as well. And I think for especially kids of immigrants, in particular, like people of color who are kids of immigrants from like Latin communities and Caribbean communities and things like that, I feel like there is a sense of perfectionism that's put upon you when you're a kid of an immigrant, because like you're expected to succeed, you're expected to get straight A's, you're expected to take APs and get into good schools, and like when you're somebody who is high functioning in that way and can do those things or feels the drive to do those things, then I also feel like that'll go a little bit undiagnosed for a while too, because they're like, well, she's doing so well, she's doing exactly what we expected her to, is what parents will say. And then when it's not going that way because of your mental health or otherwise, then now there's a problem when it could have existed the whole time. Do you feel like culturally there was ever any like difficulties with that?
1000%. Everything you said literally hit home so hard because, girl, I got through 12 years of preliminary education and 4 years of higher education under the radar because I was so overachieving. Like, I was literally a gifted student. Like, I became a student of the year for Frost senior year. Like, I did well in school. I don't know how I did it. Literally just stress. stress and anxiety drove me to succeed.
Mhm.
And how high my cortisol levels must have been, like, I don't want to talk about it. So I think something you said, like, my mom would say, like, you're so good in school, like, nothing's wrong with you. How can anything be wrong with you? And I'm just like, something's happening. So I really needed to dig deep and assess, like, okay, so I did really well in school, but how did I get there? I got there by procrastinating until the very last 6-hour period that I had to finish a project, then busting it out, doing the best work I've ever done in my life, and then feeling horrible for 2 weeks because I probably got sick from not sleeping. So, like, that is exactly where I ended up being every single time. And after college, like you said, oh, no one realizes something's wrong until it's really wrong. When I graduated, I all of a sudden went from feeling top of my game, like super successful, this amazing structure with college. I was exceeding in everything I did. And then I had no structure and I fell flat on my face immediately. And that's ultimately what drove me to get a diagnosis and become medicated and really take therapy seriously, because that dichotomy made me realize that I was relying on an established system to exist in instead of being able to manage my life on my own. And that was really hard because when you're graduating college, you want to feel like, okay, I'm an adult, I'm ready to do this. And you realize you have to take 2 steps back and be like, wow, I'm really not ready to do this yet. I have to do some self-work first. Yeah, and I think also what you said about immigrant parents, there is this perception, and like understandably so, that like they sacrifice so much to come to this country, or even if you're second gen, like their parents sacrifice so much to come to this country that you have to succeed. You have to make that sacrifice worth it. For example, my dad's grandma had a PhD. She was like Minister of Education in El Salvador for a while. And then when they moved to the US, she had to be like a basic elementary school teacher. Just a thing that people don't realize or acknowledge, that people give up entire careers and lives and educations to better their family's future in a different country, coming to the US. And oftentimes, like medical degrees, law degrees, and PhDs are non-transferable into the United States. Also understand, like, if countries have different standards and different practices, different laws, like, that's necessary. But to a point, it's also like, how much could you make this a little bit simpler to transition over? So there is that extra stress of like, they sacrifice so much, now you have to buck up and like make it worthwhile.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Like my family has similar stories too, about like just like losing education and then having to redo things over here. But I think main takeaways are like, if you are somebody who is struggling with their mental health or with getting diagnosed and things like that, your culture doesn't have to determine how you deal with it, and give yourself some grace to make mistakes and to figure it out, because we're all human and we're all trying our best. So if you need help or if you need to figure that out, try to talk to a therapist, try to see what your resources are, and we go from there, and you're doing a good job.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful conversation. I want to move into a quick break before we go into our final segment. All right, we're going into our last segment of our 3rd episode. This is just so exciting. I'm loving the conversations that are being brought to light here. I think it's so important to really talk about mental health in a way that feels non-judgmental and just open and honest. So I'm really grateful for the space to be able to do this, first of all. Now we have some audience questions. This pertains to advice or stories or situations that people share with us to get our hot takes and our advice on. So, first things first, this question is a little bit sad. It says, I just got out of a long-term relationship and I don't know how to move forward. What are some tips and tricks that you have with kind of moving on from that situation?
Oof.
So, that one is really hard. And I think there's no right or wrong answer with how to cope from that. I know you and I, Jordi, both have experiences with this, and it's so heavy, especially like moving through different parts of your life. I know that I made this transition, or I experienced this feeling kind of in the transition between leaving college and entering this new stage in my life. And it feels so hard because it almost feels like you grew up with this person in a weird way. Like you shared a part of that like early adulthood, almost end of childhood with them. And that feels like such a special, vulnerable moment where you really started becoming who you were going to be. And having that groundwork so intertwined with another person and their growth, it hurts a lot to have to like detangle all of that, like, you know, all of that history. But I will say that, I mean, I don't know exactly what happened to the situation, like if it ended positively or not, but I will say, looking back on it with a fond heart and just like remembering the positive memories and the happy things that you did together, the lessons that you took away from it are the most important things to do to preserve your mental health, and also realize it wasn't a waste of time, it wasn't a mistake. As long as it was healthy and good for you in the moment, you're allowed to look back on it with love, because love is beautiful. And even if it's love that's past, I think there's still a lot of like validity to it.
Yeah, that's beautiful also, the way that you worded that. Yeah, if you can do it with love, that's the most important thing. I think for me, one of the things that I learned from my last breakup from a long-term relationship was allowing yourself to grieve is a huge part of it. Because I think we live in the kind of generation where we try to get over things quickly, and we have a whole bunch of sayings of like how to get over somebody and like how to try to like numb yourself out and distract from it. But really, you cannot heal until you feel your wounds. And no matter how it ended, even if it's the most amicable thing in the world, there's so much pain. And I think if you can allow yourself to absolutely, like, the most tragic, pathetic crying you've ever had in your life, it is so cathartic, but also it's really needed. Like, make it so dramatic. Because
Yeah.
if you're too afraid to feel your feelings, they will come up in other ways. And when you try to get into things too quickly afterwards, when your heart just isn't ready, then that person also suffers if you're bringing in baggage from your last one. If you're not, then you're good to go, right? But if you can manage to know what you were missing in that relationship, or know what you lacked as a partner in that relationship, learn from it, grieve it, cry about it, and like have a support system to help you through that as well, eventually it'll start feeling a lot easier. So just try your best.
Yeah. That's beautiful too. Another thing also is like taking stock of what went well and what didn't go well in your last relationship. When you feel like you're at a point where you're a little bit past the first stages of grief and you're moving into a healthier place, I think it's also important to reflect on things that you don't want to repeat in your next relationship, whether it's from you or from something that your partner did.
Agreed.
Okay, woo, that was a heavy one. We have another question here as well. So this person asks, I just moved to a new city and I'm having a really hard time making friends. How do you go about that as an adult? Is that something you have experience with? This is something that I'm struggling with sometimes too. We've talked about this a bit, like off air, but I think it's so important to join groups that give you a community. So, for example, in Miami, there's a couple of apps, like one called Clicks, that allows you to join wellness groups or like go do Pilates at dawn on the beach or something, like just like random events where you can meet other like-minded girls. Like either you can do a wellness event, you can go out to a happy hour, you can go to a club, you can do an arts and crafts event. Like there's a lot of opportunities for that. Mind you, it can feel very anxiety riddled to like go out there and meet new people and really commit to an event like that. That's something that I've struggled with. Like I've been on those apps, but I've only gone to like one event or two events. And sometimes also it feels like when you're at the space, there's this pressure to like, okay, let's make this worthwhile. Like, let's make a connection. But just like dating, you're not going to click with everyone. And that's also okay, because what I've learned in my 20s as trying to make new friends, it's kind of like dating. You have to date your new friends and see if you have common interests and see if you like to do the same things, see if you have that platonic chemistry, because if it's not there, it probably won't be there. And it's okay to respectfully move on if it's not working.
That kind of concept of a third place that we talked about, that's not your home and it's not your work. If you can kind of try to find things that you care about or that you like, and just go there for the sake of like feeding your soul, like just go there because you like it, you will find like-minded people. And it's kind of the same place. It's like those are probably the places where you would find people you'd want to date also. Like when like you should feel like the people that you date and the people you want to be friends with, that you have common connections and values and interests. It doesn't have to be everything, but I think when it comes to finding friends and building a support system in your 20s, when you're in an unfamiliar place or in a place that you've been but just haven't really been able to connect to the community, finding things that you genuinely like spending time on is a great way to do that. And you don't have to feel like you have to talk to everybody, or that if you talk to somebody and they blow you off or they're not that interested in talking to you, that it has to be a failure. But if you can just, find a bookstore that you really like and just sit there by yourself a couple times, and then maybe work up the courage to, if you see somebody that you've met before. For me in particular, I've lived in New York my whole life, and I had friends from high school, but I think moving back after living in Miami in the past like year and a half, almost 2 years, this is the most number of people I've met since I've lived here in these really short amount of time, simply because I just started going to things that I liked and like asking people for help in different places that I was unfamiliar with, like going to concerts and like telling people I like their shoes, or like giving people compliments in general. Everyone loves to feel good about themselves, but also if you can reach out with kindness and vulnerability and just be very like forthcoming as a person, I feel like that will always draw more people into you. So just go out in the world, just exist. And if you can just strike up conversation, even if it doesn't have to go anywhere, eventually you'll start feeling more comfortable talking to people, and you might make some really good friends that way.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. That is our show. That is our third episode of our podcast. Once again, this is the Jasmine Ortiz Show on 99.7 The Heat Miami. My name is Jasmine Ortiz. This is my lovely co-host, Jordi Polycarpe. We will be with you again next week. Make sure you have a great time, enjoy yourself, put your mental health first, and keep it Jasmine.